Okay, picking up from the end of the first video, I left you with these questions. This is on page 90 of our textbook. I said, answer this. When we solve C equals 30 plus 80A, what happened with the input and output units with G of C? You should have said something about they switched, okay? The output and input units switched spots. So when we started, our input was acres and our output was the dollars, okay? But when we solved it, when we changed it, it became that our input was the cost and our output was the acres. So you should have said the input and output units switched. And the units of the domain and range of function g, which is this guy, the domain units was the dollars, cost in dollars, and the range unit was acres. Okay, number 6. Discuss with your group. We're not doing that. How are the domain and range of f of a related to those of g of c? Use your response in item 3 to explain why the relationship exists. So we have f of a, so we're asking about f of a, which was the first one. F of a was this one up here. C equals 30 plus 80a. So that was 30 plus 80a. And then g of c was the second function that we found, and it was c minus 30 over 80. Okay, and it says, how are the domain and range of f of a related to g of c? Okay, so the domain and the range switch spots. So before, f of a's input was acres and its output was dollars. When we solved f of a for a, the input and output switched. The new function g of c has an input of dollars and an output of acres. So it switched the domain and range when we changed the function and solved for a. So moving on to 7 here, use the appropriate functions to evaluate each expression. So that means our answer will be a number. Also, you can tell since there's a number in the parentheses, that means our answer will be a number. And on this first one, we're using function g. It says g of 60. So we're going to take that 60 and we're going to plug it into here. So since our input on that one is the cost, this is $60. So g of 60 equals 60 minus 30 over 80. 60 minus 30 is 30. 30 divided by 80 gives us that 0.375 acres. Does that sound familiar? Well, if you look back up here, oops, not far enough. Hey, look, $60. So up here, minus 30, isn't that the first thing we did? Was minus 30, and then we divided by 80. Well, that's what's happening here. When I plugged in the 60, the first thing I did was subtract 30, and then I divided by 80. Okay, on B, we have a composition. This is f of g of 60. So that g of 60 is what we found up here. G of 60 was 0.375. So that's what we're going to plug in here. So really what we're finding is f of 0.375. That's what we're finding here. So I can replace the g of 60 with the 0.375 because they are equivalent. I like color coordinating things. So I'm using function f now. So now I have 30 plus 80 times 0.375. I'm using this function. So I want you to notice, going backwards here, if I were to go backwards here on the previous problem, multiply by 80 and then add the 30, that's what's happening here. 80 times 0.375 is going to give us 30. Then I have 30 plus 30, which is 60. So f of g of 60 gives us 60. Interesting. So this is $60. The input, we input $60, but then the output was $60. Think about why that might have happened. Think about why that might have happened. Really all we did here was reverse. So up here, like I said, think about the operations. First we did 60 minus 30 and then we divided by 80. Then down here we multiplied by 80 and then added 30. So we're just reversing the steps that we took in A to get the answer that's in B. Hey, inverse, reverse. Sounds very similar, huh? Okay, f of 2. So we're using function f on C here. So it's going to be f of 2 is 30 plus 80a. Oop, got to change the a to a 2. Okay, 80 times 2 is 160. 160 plus 30 gives us 190. So f of 2 equals 190. And then on F, our input was acres, so this was 2 acres. That means this is $190. So what's going to happen here? So f of 2, we're finding g of f of 2. And f of 2 was 190, so we need to find g of 190. What's going to happen? So we're using function g. So that's going to be 190 minus 30 over 80. So think about what we're about to do here. We're going to subtract 30 and then divide by 80. In the last problem, we multiplied by 80 and added 30. So 190 minus 30 is 160 over 80. Look, there's that 160 again. And then 160 over 80 is 2. So we get that this answer is 2. Because we reversed the operations that we did in the last problem. So this is $190. And this is 2 acres. So f of 2 gave us, g of f of 2 gave us 2. And up here, f of g of 60 gave us 60. This is what happens with inverses, okay? If you do a composition with functions that are inverses, you're going to get this, your input is going to be the same as your output. So right here, it just says interpret the meaning of each expression and its corresponding value. Be sure to include your units. So on A, our input was $60 and our output was 0.375 acres. On B, our input was $60 and our output was $60. And then on C, our input was 2 acres and our output was $190. And then on D, our input was 2 acres and then our output was 2 acres. And then on B and C, these are both composite functions. We were doing a composition on these two. Oops, I spelled it wrong. Don't judge me. Composite. These are both composite functions. So that's this one and this one. All the arrows. Okay, so for this video, I want you to answer these two questions. In general, what is the result when you evaluate f of g of x and g of f of x? What do you get? So it's referencing B here and D. What happens when we find f of g of whatever? That's what the x means. F of g of anything. What do we get? Or g of f of x in these two problems. And what do the answers in items 7 through 9 suggest about f and g? 7 through 9. So it's talking about 7, 8, and 9. Answer those questions.